Number of people displaced due to a rapid rise in water levels, which led to cracking of the Alau Dam in Maiduguri, the capital city of Borno State in northern Nigeria. Reports say Nigeria has announced that the city is experiencing one of the worst floods in 30 years.
Socio-economic activities have been crippled owing to heavy downpour and the collapse of water channels at the Alau Dam. Over 500,000 people have been displaced by the floods. While no casualties have been reported, many are concerned about the lack of preparedness and inadequate facilities to address such disasters.
Vice President Kashim Shettima was among the top government officials who visited the flood-ravaged areas to assess the damage and to offer support for victims. The governor says that about 40% of the capital city remains flooded, with at least 2 million affected, and extent of destruction is quote beyond human imagination, but the state cannot show that alone. And thousands of displaced people are in settlement camps, while hundreds are more still trapped.
Now, there are concerns about an outbreak of waterborne diseases like cholera because water sources have been contaminated.
It might be associated with climate change. That is the most important thing. So what we need to do is to now reinforce the dam, reconstruct the dam, expand the capacity of the dam, and most importantly, defilt the drains. Because most of the waterways were occupied by human beings. If you can remember a few years ago when I was sworn in as the governor of Borno State, I followed all this route and I asked people to bucket on the waterways. But unfortunately, people don't heed to our own advice. People build homes right inside waterways, thereby reducing the width of the canals. These are some of the factors that are responsible for the overflowing. But most importantly, we are witnessing rainfall, storm that has not been, seen in the recent years, up to 50, 60 years ago. So the soil has become completely saturated. So what we decided to do is to give 10,000 naira to each of the heads of household.
Well, we're here today on behalf of the Nigerian Governance Forum to commiserate with the government and people of Borno State over the Alau Dam Bridge. Also to commend Mr. President for the quick reaction by dispatching the Vice President alongside him, President and the Northeast Development Commission. On our part, the forum will do the needful to support our colleague. But from what we've seen in the media, it's truly a major disaster, in which we would also try to see ourselves. We know the hardship and challenges that people will go through, and we know also the necessity is up to the task in making sure we bring support to the people and turn things around immediately as soon as possible. We just pray for Allah's guidance in this process and wish the people of the state good tidings, and we pray for them.
Joining us live is the co-lead on environment thematic areas at the Women Environmental Program, Tine. Again, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you on the show this morning.
Pleasure to be here this morning.
And just before you came in, we were talking about President Tinubu's visit to the United Kingdom on the request of the King, discussions from the COP28 and in preparation for the COP29. But now we can see truly that it's a discussion we should be having, because obviously nature is angry. Yes. Now, how can we start addressing these issues, environmental issues that are obviously coming from the climate change?
Okay, first, my heart goes out to the residents and good people of Borno State who have been affected by the floods. And I'd like to appreciate all stakeholders who have been taking concerted action to bring succor to those who have suffered loss, be it in terms of material resources or those who have also lost their lives. Obviously, like you have rightly noted, nature is angry with us. because as human beings, we have failed to protect nature as we go about our daily activities. As we seek decent living in our day-to-day activities, we have over-interrupted with the balance that is in nature. And so now we see the awful impacts of that reaction in terms of the extreme weather events like the flooding which we have experienced, not just in Borno State, but of course in many other locations across Nigeria. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, has issued warnings of impending floods in different locations across Nigeria. And that goes to tell us the extent to which nature is showing its anger at us for failing to live our lives according to how humans can live in harmony with nature. And so a first step to addressing this will be to take a critical look at how nature was way before now, to take a critical look at the changes that have happened over time, and then to take concerted actions to see to it that our living does not over-interfere with the balance in nature. And so nature is able to be resilient, and so our human beings are also able to be resilient, and that we can live in harmony with nature.
You know, so I remember that NEMA has been issued warnings in the last 5 months.
Right.
As a matter of fact, at the beginning of this year, I remember so many times they've issued. I've covered events where NEMA have said there'll be heavy downpours in some states, and of course, Borno, Kebbi was also mentioned. How do you think that we need to start having to bridge this gap of preparing enough when the agency who is in charge of this kind of situation says there is going to be this? How do we prepare for it? What are the measures that we need to take? What are the things that we need to do going forward to mitigate this kind of situation that is, yes, I know that nature is angry, but at the same time, you know, we are the ones who caused it, but we can also find solutions to it. How do we do that?
So I would say that there are multiple approaches which we can adopt as a people, be it as individuals or as systems, to address these challenges that we have. Unfortunately, I must also mention that there are individuals as well as systems that deny the existence of climate change. Let me also just bring in to highlight that a number of persons have attributed the current flooding in Borno State to climate change. You will also see that there are some who have said it is not as a result of climate change, it is because the agencies who were in charge of maintaining the Lao Dam failed to do their work, and that is why one of the structures was compromised. But if we look at the larger issue which caused the flooding or the breakage of the dam, it was because there were torrential rainfalls that were beyond the level that these dams could contain. And so that was as a result of climate change. And so we need to begin to speak more to individuals in communities, to decision makers, to public officials, to understand that truly the climate is changing and that its impacts are becoming more extreme as it is felt in the floods that we are having now. We must begin to speak to decision makers in public spaces to allocate more resources to addressing the drivers of climate change, which it's global warming, or which is the overuse of environmental resources. Bringing it simpler, the cutting down of trees for use as firewood and then for construction purposes, the overemphasis on the use of fossil fuels, the over-tilling of soils. There are quite a number of actions that as human beings we take which impact the balance that is in nature. And so as people who understand this, we must be able to get the support and buy-in of every critical stakeholder to see to it that yes, truly, the climate is changing, and that yes, truly, every one of us needs to take concerted actions to address this. As individuals, we will need to watch how that we cut down trees for use in our individual homes and for different purposes. And as decision makers who are in government and at other levels, we must begin to get them to show deliberateness, if at all there is a word like that, to be more intentional about allocating resources to programs and activities that address climate change, but not just the impacts of climate change, but that address the key drivers of climate change within our contexts.
Okay, and then Tine, so now we're saying that, I mean, the Alao Dam is the cause of this current flooding being experienced in Borno State, and I'm wondering, Demola also pointed out that as early as, or as far back as earlier in the year, NEMA have been shouting that we would have these impending disasters coming our way. So with things like this, what are the practical ways or steps that we could have taken from January until now to ensure that the people who are now facing these displacements and all that in Borno have lesser sufferings? Is it a reality, considering the fact that we forecasted early that there's going to be this, and now it's coming from we're now saying it's the Alao Dam? Could there have been a way to mitigate it? Yes,
okay. There are ways. And like I mentioned, everyone who is within this ecosystem has a role to play. The persons within the communities who have been badly affected by these floods also have a role to play. Same way the agencies of government that are responsible for providing services also had a role to play. I also hear that when the locals around there discovered that the water levels in the dam were rising, they alerted the officials who were responsible for that, and I'm not able to tell what actions were taken. But there are adaptation measures that the locals would have been taking, like relocating from their communities to safer, higher grounds, because you know that whenever you have issues of flooding, oftentimes the floodplains will be affected more. And so a first measure will be for the locals in communities to relocate to safer, higher grounds. Then again, speaking on the responsibilities of the authorities, it would have been also necessary or proactive if the responsible agencies began to maybe reduce, so to speak, or make for the gradual release of the waters that were contained in that dam, so that in the event that we had this torrential rainfalls, as was predicted by NEMA, we would have had a situation whereby the green infrastructure, which is referred to the dam now, was better able to contain the magnitude of the rains that came eventually. And so I would like to see it as a dual responsibility, where people in the communities, beyond just raising their alarms, also took the proactive measure to relocate themselves to safer, higher grounds, and where the authorities in place also activated, so to speak, the actions required of the maintenance of such dams, especially when you have water levels rising beyond the expected.
Sorry, Demola, just a clarification. So from what you're saying, we could have controlled where the water went to, in a simple term? If they opened the channel before the flooding, could they have controlled where the water went to, rather than the water just overflowing on its own? And
I believe that there could have been a better control of the waters if perhaps the authorities who were responsible for the management of that dam took proactive measures to control it.
You know, you talked about maintenance of that particular dam. In 12 years, over 700 million has been budgeted for that particular dam. 762 million, as a matter of fact. From one administration, from the Jonathan administration down to this particular administration, being different allocations to that particular dam. Now, if there are money dedicated for it, and despite that, the dam is still in a poor shape, you know, you talked about budgets being, money being allocated, you know, for different of these facilities. But now, from what we see, money are allocated. Is it that the money is not enough, or is it that the people who are in charge of the maintenance of those places, they're not doing what they're supposed to do? How do government get to, you know, have a monitoring instrument that will monitor the people that are supposed to monitor the things that are supposed to be done? Okay,
so then what I would like to look at is from the broader perspective.
All right.
Remember, I had emphasized earlier the need for awareness raising. Yeah. And when I talk about awareness raising, it is not just limited to the locals, including the persons who are in government too. There is a possibility that officials of agencies responsible for the management of these facilities might require much more training and awareness to be able to cope with the changing dynamics of weather elements and how they affect this critical infrastructure. And so I would want to look at it from that perspective, that perhaps maybe because the projections were beyond the level that was expected, possibly they lacked the technical capacity to be better able to handle this extremism as they came. And so I would advocate for mandatory continuous training for officials who are responsible for the management of these facilities, even while we also take a critical look at the broader other issues of transparency and accountability in terms of the management of resources that have been also allocated for the management of this critical infrastructure.
I think that the Ministry of Water Resources has a lot of questions. We need to ask them a lot of questions concerning, because we can't keep having this kind of situation when money are budgeted for it. You know, it is unheard of when a ministry that is supposed to be in charge of these kind of things, and they're saying, and it looks as if they don't know what to do. My question is, how should the Ministry of Water Resources begin to approach, you know, the issue of flooding in Nigeria? Because it's not there in Borno. I think it's sometimes in June or July, the whole of Lagos was waterlogged everywhere. How do we begin to address these things when we can begin to use the money that is meant for it, while using it for it?
Okay, so that's another angle to it. I only recently read a statement by the Honorable Minister of Water Resources and Sanitation, Professor Otse, and the statement was that the flooding in Borno currently is not as a result of the collapse of the Alao Dam. The statement read that it was as a result of an overflow of the Ngada River, which is one of the major tributaries feeding into the dam. And so in the face of these conflicting attributions, it will be necessary for us to maybe take a step back again and then reassess perhaps what possibly may have caused the floods in Borno. But despite these multiple attributions, there is no disputing the fact that there was a torrential rainfall as a result of extreme weather events, which of course have been linked to the impacts of climate change, which are leading to extreme weather variabilities.
All right, Tina, I'm a bit concerned and worried at the same time. I feel like we always, as a people, find ourselves in a place where, you know, there's an alarm or there are signs of impending danger, and then it meets us and we're never ready.
Exactly.
I mean, it cuts across everything. It's not just about flooding or natural disasters, even health. How do we start developing, you know, that attitude to get ready for things? Is it about a change of orientation, or is it an intentional government thing? Does it have to do with the people in power, or is it something that we as a people have to start working on?
So I agree with you. The last 2 points we raised, all those will have to come into play. First and foremost, as a people, we will need to know that we are the primary persons who can take care of ourselves. And so we begin to assess ourselves, assess our local environment, and then come up with individually developed adaptation measures to which will enable us better live with the changes which we are currently experiencing. And then again, as a people who live within systems that are governed, we will, it is only appropriate that the persons who are in charge of these governance systems also live up to their responsibilities by guiding us along the path that also enable us better live with these realities. And so yes, as a people, we need to begin to adopt better adaptation measures, do less of firewood, make deliberate efforts to learn and not just wait for the government to maybe take actions. And then as a government too, we know that we have elected persons into government so that they are better able to take policies and then manage our collective resources in such manner that every one of us lives happily at the end of the day. And so it will be a dual responsibility on the part of individuals who are led and those who also lead to live up to their responsibilities that ensure that we live healthily in our environment.
All right, so Tine, COP after COP, we have committees, and now we're preparing for COP29. Please, what are the things we should start seeing from their policies to tell us that, yes, we have started implementing?
Okay, so the conversations around the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change are quite very interesting. As we prepare for COP29, there are very critical decisions that we are expecting that will be taken at COP29. One of them is the call for climate justice, which we are aware that the global northern countries, as it were, are those who are more responsible for the emissions of greenhouse gases, which, yeah, that sounds the greenhouse gases, for example, carbon dioxide, which have been affecting or which is the major cause of global warming, and which of course is leading to the flooding that we have currently. And so we are looking at how major decisions will be taken on getting the global northern countries to pay for the damage which they have caused. And such monies will be used to support mitigation activities and then adaptation activities within the global southern countries, which of course are many of the countries in Africa are involved. So we want to see the translation of those commitments by global northern countries to action as one of the key takeaways from COP29, amongst many other issues.
So on the last question, just to raise these on what you just said, I think that's, some have said that's going to be a very tall order, you know, for the Western countries to pay for the damage that they have caused, you know, and which has begged the question of committees after committees are set up. When this money, if for example the money is being paid, how do we ensure that it's properly used for what it's supposed to be used for?
That is why the action of civil society organizations is very necessary. Civil society organizations are more like the bridge between the government and communities, because we understand the workings of government systems, and at the same time we also work very closely with locals in communities. And so we are able to bridge that gap between the led and the leadership. And so civil society also helps to provide some sort of checks and balances on the actions that are taken by authorities. And so if these monies are released by global northern countries, especially to government officials, it will be the responsibility of government institutions as expected to be as accountable as possible. But in the event where we have challenges with that, it behoves on civil society organizations like ours and many others to see to it that they put close checks on the governments to ensure that those monies are expended and that they reach the persons who suffer the impacts of climate change most in our communities in the most accountable manner.
Thank you very much. It's been a very wonderful discussion, but of course we can exhaust it.
My pleasure.
Thank you. We'll go on a break. While we'll come back, we'll go straight to the headlines.